1.3 is about adding rational numbers. Now, yesterday we talked about adding integers. What is an integer? A positive or negative whole number. Now, remember, a rational number simply means it can be written as a fraction or a decimal. So today we're going to be adding fractions and decimals. First thing we're going to look at is using a number line to find the sum. If you look at problem A, read to me what it says. Negative 1/7 plus 3/7. All right, so we've got some positives and we have some negatives. What I want us to look at first, we are going to always start at the 0. It first asks us to go to negative 1/7. When I'm going in a negative direction on a number line, do I go left or right? Left. Very good. So I'm going to go ahead and just take my arrow, and I'm over here now. You can see I landed on negative 1/7. Now I'm going to start from that point, and it has asked me to go to positive 3/7. If I'm going in a positive direction, do I go left or right? We're going to go to the right. So how many spaces am I moving over? 3/7. 1/7, 2/7, 3/7. What did I land up on? 2/7. So directly underneath it, you're going to go ahead and put your answer. Our answer is 2/7. So that means negative 1/7 plus 3/7 is 2/7. Going on to the next one, we are going to go ahead and start again, always at the 0. Problem B is asking us 1/7 minus 4/7. So we will always start at the 0. I'm going to go over 1/7. Now that I'm at 1/7, which direction am I going? Look right here. If you remember yesterday, I taught you something special. Every number has a sign, and that sign is directly in front of that number. Everyone say that with me. Every number has a sign, and that sign is directly in front of that number. So what number do I have here? Negative 4/7. I know many of you are thinking, no, Miss Vorpahl, that means minus 4/7. But something I want you to learn and understand, if you are subtracting a number, it is a negative number because you're taking it away. So this number right here is negative 4/7. So at this time, we are going to start from here and we are going to go backwards 4/7. 1/7, 2/7, 3/7, 4/7. What fraction did I end up on?
Negative 3/7.
Thank you for saying negative 3/7. It's important to keep that negative with it. So negative 3/7 is correct. I would like you guys to go ahead and try problem C on your own. One thing that is very important to remember, we just said the saying, let's say it together again. Every number has a sign, and that sign is directly in front of that number. So the first thing we'll always do, we're going to go ahead and start on the 0. And which direction am I going? To the left, because it says right here, negative 2/7. So I'm going to go over 1/7, 2/7. Now I'm going to start right here. As I just said, every number has a sign, and that sign is directly in front of that number. What's in front of this 2/7? A negative. So remember, that's attached to that. So when I'm going negative, do I go left or right on a number line? You have to go to the left 2/7 more. 1/7, 2/7. So what did I end up on?
Negative 4/7.
Negative 4/7. How many of you would say you did get that correct? How many of you guys got 0? Be careful. That just means you forgot that every number has a sign, and the sign is directly in front of that number. Don't just think about it as a minus sign. If it's a negative, it means you're taking it away. So yes, you're subtracting it, but that would always go to the left. Next up, we've got these rules for adding integers. An integer is a whole number that's positive or negative. Today we're talking about rational numbers, but we use the same exact rules as we did yesterday for our integers. Yesterday I taught you a song. Let's see if you happen to remember what it was. Remember, it's to the tune of Row, Row, Row Your Boat. Okay, here we go. Same sign, add and keep, different signs subtract. Take the sign of the larger number, then you'll be exact. Excellent job remembering the song. Remember, sometimes putting things to music can stick in our head just a little bit better than if we just are trying to memorize the rules. So remember, same sign, add and keep, different signs, subtract and take. One more thing, remember I do have this up here in a red pen, so you want to make sure you write it in your notes in a red pen because that means it's important and I want you to remember it. So go ahead and write this in your notes for me. As we've already said a couple times today, every number has a sign, and that sign is directly in front of that number. Please try your best to remember this because this will help you a lot when we're dealing with positive and negative numbers. This next part of your notes is talking about eliminating double signs. Sometimes when we have double signs, it can get a little bit confusing. So I want to teach you something that hopefully will help it to make just a little bit more clear. When solving equations, integers will not be written using parentheses. Sometimes we will use parentheses because it kind of keeps that negative sign with a number, but you do not always have to use those parentheses. You need to understand the following rules, though, in order to get rid of those parenthesis signs. So right here it says adding a negative is the same exact thing as subtracting it. So let's just imagine that you owe somebody $5. Is that positive or is that negative? Negative. It's negative because you have to give it to them. So right here, my first example says 10 plus negative 4. Sometimes it can be confusing when you have plus minus right next door to each other. So we're going to get rid of 1. Let me explain to you. Always, when adding and subtracting integers, the negative wins. Just like sometimes you can have a negative person around you, and it can make you start to feel negative, even if you had felt positive before. So, although we don't necessarily want negative people around, a lot of times their attitude stands out. So when we have something like this, plus minus, or positive negative, the negative always wins. So let's go ahead, before we rename how we would do this, let's do our rules together. Is the 10 positive or negative? Positive. Is this positive or negative? Negative. Same sign or different sign?
Different sign.
These are different signs. What do I do when I have different signs?
Subtract.
Subtract and take. What's 10 minus 4? 6. And is this positive or negative?
Positive.
It's a positive. So directly underneath it, you're going to go ahead and put that. Now, if it is confusing to you where it says 10 plus negative 4, that means the same exact thing as 10 minus 4. Okay, so you can basically just eliminate this positive sign right here. Because remember, when a positive and negative are side by side with no number between them, the negative sign wins. What is 10 minus 4? 6. Notice that we got the same exact answer when doing it, whether it said 10 plus negative 4 or 10 minus 4. So let's go to our next example over here. This says 15 plus negative 5. Once again, it can be confusing when you have two signs side by side. So we are able to eliminate one of the signs. Who wins every time, the positive or the negative? The negative will always win. So that means the same thing as what? 15 minus 5. This is the same exact thing. 15 plus negative 5 or 15 minus 5. Okay? If I'm looking at this one right here, I can see different signs, subtract and take. When I do that, I get 10. Over here, when I have 15 minus 5, what's my answer? 10. So it means the same exact thing. It's just kind of a simpler way to get rid of one of your signs. Always remember, if it says plus a minus number, that means you're subtracting it. Next up, we talked about this yesterday with double negatives. Read me what this next part says. A double negative sign equals a positive. Remember how we talked about that yesterday? It says 5 minus negative 6. Those two negative signs turn into a positive. But instead of saying 5 plus 6, we say what? 5 plus 6. You only need one. And the answer, no matter what, is what, guys? 11 is correct. So going on to the next one, 10 minus negative 10. What happens to my double negative signs? They both become a positive, and instead of saying 10 plus 10, we say plain old 10 plus 10. And what does that equal? 20. Does that make sense with the double negative sign? Okay, very good. So let's do a few examples together. Now we are going to be working with some fractions and some decimals. Find the sum and write the fractions in simplest form. So from now until the end of your math life in college, you will always put answers in simplest form. That means you're going to reduce them to as small as they can go. First things up, negative 8/3 plus 5/6. The one thing you've got to remember when you're adding and subtracting fractions is you must have a common denominator. What would my common denominator be between the 3 and the 6? A 6, okay? Because the 3 can fit into a 6. How would I get from a 3 to a 6? What do I have to do?
If you do 3 times 2, that would be 6. So you'd have
You
to
are
do
correct.
something at the top.
Very good. If I'm multiplying by 2, because 3 times 2 will end up giving me 6, and they would have a common denominator. I've got to be fair. Just like with a brother or sister, you want your parents to be fair. You have to be fair to the denominator and the numerator. So if I multiply the bottom by 2, I have to do what to the top?
Multiply the top.
Also multiply it by 2. Very good job. So now because we work underneath, the first thing you're going to do always is drop down your sign. So that first number is a negative. Drop down your negative sign. And now what would my new fraction be? Instead of 8/3, when I multiply on top and bottom, what do I get? 16/6. Good job. That's an equivalent fraction. That means it equals the same thing as this one right here. It's just been multiplied by 2 on top and bottom. What's the sign I need to bring down? A plus sign right there. So we're going to go ahead and drop that down. And do I need to change the 5/6? No, because it already shares the same common denominator. Now, let's look at it carefully. Just like with integers, do I have the same sign or a different sign? Different sign. Sing it with me. Same sign, add and keep, different sign.
Subtract.
All right, we have to subtract it. What is 16 minus 5? 11. And remember, you always will keep your denominator the same. When adding and subtracting, you do not want to add 6 and 6. No, if you have negative 16/6 plus 5/6, the answer is 11/6. Okay, you keep the 6 exactly the same. Now, take the sign of the larger number. Was the larger number a positive or a negative? A negative, because negative 16 is bigger than just plain old 5. So the answer should be what, guys? Negative 11/6. Some of you are wondering if you should turn that into a mixed number. As you can see, my original problem actually had an improper fraction. So I am okay if you keep this answer right here as an improper fraction. If it had started off as a mixed number, I want you to end as a mixed number. Let's go to the next one, problem B to the right. Remember, I'm dealing with fractions. First thing you look at is for a common denominator. Charbel, do I have a common denominator on problem B? Yes, I do. Notice both of them have a 2 on the bottom. There is a double sign here, though. I have plus a minus 3/2. What always wins, the positive or the negative?
Negative.
The negative always wins. So I'm going to go ahead and rewrite this negative half, and instead of saying plus minus, what do I write? If you're ever adding a negative, it just means you have to subtract it, okay? Minus 3/2. Now that I have eliminated my double sign, do I have the same sign or a different sign? All right, some are saying same and some are saying different. Remember that saying that I said? Say it with me. Every number has a sign, and that sign is directly in front of that number. Notice, this is a negative and this is a negative. Are those the same or different? Same sign. Add the numbers, keep the sign. Remember, when dealing with halves, my answer has to come out as a half. Okay, so that is going to stay as my denominator. And now you can basically just look at the numerator, -1 and -3. When you add those together, what do you get? -4. So -1/2 minus 3/2 equals -4/2. Could that be simplified at all?
Yes.
What would it be? Okay, I'm getting 1/2. I got some -1/2. Here's what I want you to remember, and you can always do work like this if it helps you. What number can go into a 4 that can also go into a 2?
2.
What can I divide by? A 2. If I divide by, because remember, you're getting smaller. If I divide by 2 on top, I have to divide by 2 on the bottom. When I do that, what is 4 divided by 2?
2.
What is 2 divided by 2?
1.
Is that a 1/2?
No.
No, what is that?
2.
That's a 2. Okay, it's 2/1, but your answer is -2. Be careful, make sure you don't switch up the numerator and the denominator. Okay, so your answer is -2. Going on to the next one, problem C. I've got a lot going on in this problem. Do I have just plain old fractions? No. What is that first number there? It is a mixed number. Is there a way that I can turn this mixed number into a fraction? Who can help me with that? what would I do, Javaria? Make it an improper fraction, okay? So 8 times 1 is 8, plus 3 is 11. So you would have negative 11/8. Now drop down your plus sign, because remember, anything that's up here, you're basically just dropping it straight down. Now remember, when I have fractions, I must have a common denominator. Are those two common? No. How can I get my fourths to turn into eighths? Times 2. If I do it to the bottom, I have to also do it to the top. So this is the way that you show me your work. In your notes, since we're showing work like this, I also want you to show work exactly like this on homework, quizzes, and tests. So now instead of 5/4, let's go ahead and multiply it. What's 5 times 2? 10. And 4 times 2? 8. Now let's go back to our rules. Same sign, add and keep, different sign, subtract and take. Sabrina, do I have the same sign or a different sign? Different sign, so what should I do? Subtract and take. When you subtract and take that, what do you get? What is it? Negative 1/8. She remembered to take the sign from the larger number, and then she was exact. Negative 1/8 is correct. Next up, are they both fractions? No. In order to add and subtract a fraction, I've got to have them looking kind of the same. So what can I do to my 4 to make it look like a fraction? What do you think?
Since and the other fraction 2.
Okay, correct. So we have an imaginary 1 underneath the 4. As he was saying before, I need to get a common denominator. So what do you think my common denominator should be? A 2. How do I get this 1 to turn into a 2? Multiply it by 2. So let's just go ahead and multiply by 2 on the bottom and multiply by 2 on the top. Cameron, what do I get? Instead of 4/1, I now have 8/2, 8 halves. Now, if you remember, I've got these double signs again, plus a minus. What does plus a minus or plus a negative always mean to do? Just subtract. It just means I'm taking it away. So I'm just going to drop down the minus sign because minus always wins, and minus 7 halves. Do I have the same sign or a different sign? Every number has a sign, and that sign's directly in front of that number. What is this? That's a positive. What is this? That's a negative. Remember, don't just think of it as a minus sign. If you're taking it away, it is a negative. Are those the same signs or a different sign? Different signs. Subtract the numbers, take the sign of the larger number. What's my answer? 1/2. Now, it didn't even have to be that complicated. You probably could look at it and know 8 halves minus 7 halves is 1/2. Okay, don't try to complicate it, but I did want to go ahead and work through it with the rules that we have learned. Any questions on how to do those ones? All right, let's go ahead and work on a few decimals. First up, same kind of rules apply as we talked about before. Let me have Nehemiah. Do I have the same signs or different signs? Different signs. Look directly in front. What kind is this? A negative. What kind is this? So is that different or the same? Those are the same. Same sign. What do I do, guys? Add and keep. So, because this is not a calculator chapter, since we've been working in class without calculators, your quiz and your test is not a calculator quiz or test, okay? So let's just go ahead and do it over here on the side. I have 0.75 plus 1.5. Remember, you have to line up your decimals when adding or subtracting. Is there any imaginary zeros I should put in there? Yes, write what? Underneath the 5. Okay, so now let's just go ahead and add them together. When you do that, what do you get? 2.25. Very good. Now, same sign, add the numbers, and keep the sign. So should this be positive or negative? It should be negative because here we have negative signs for both of them. So your correct answer is negative 2.25. Let's go on to the next one. Brody, problem F to the right. Every number has a sign and that sign directly in front of that number. Are these the same sign or a different sign? Different sign. This is a negative, this is a positive. What do I do if they have different signs? Subtract and keep. Good job. So over here to the side, I'm just going to take the bigger number and put it on top. and I'm going to subtract the 4. Where should I put the 4? At the left side or the right side? The left side, because 4 point what? 0, 0. Please make sure you always line up those decimal points, and remember your decimal point always comes right after the whole number. Now you're just going to go ahead and subtract it. And Brody, what do you get when you subtract?
Negative 1.35.
Okay, very good. And he remembered the bigger number was a negative, so he kept the negative sign with it. Excellent job. Who feels comfortable and confident and wants to do the next one? All right, quite a few people. Harmony, help me out. Same sign or different sign? Same sign, add and keep. So let's go ahead and add the numbers and keep the sign. Notice how we have lined up our decimal points. When you added those together, what did you get?
6.
Very good. Okay, so we had a 6.0, but you can just make that more simple, which is a 6. And should that be positive or negative? Good job, because we had 2 negative numbers we added together, and they still equal a negative number. Any questions for her on how we did that? All right, I want you guys to try to do the last one on your own. Okay, I saw some great answers. Who would say these are the same sign? Who would say they're different signs? Good job. They are different signs, so we're going to subtract and take. I'm going to do 1.65. One of the main mistakes I saw is people forgot to line up the decimal point. I like to just stick that decimal point there and then look to see, okay, this says 0.9, and I'm going to have an imaginary 0 at the end. Then once I do that, I will see my answer is 0.75. The larger number was positive because if you look right here, a 1 is bigger than a 0. All right, so you should have kept it as a positive 0.75. So here we've got a modeling real life situation, which just means it's something that can actually happen in real life. So it makes math make sense to us. Remember the additive inverse rule. I know, once again, those are big, tricky math terms. Does anyone remember what that word inverse means? All right. You got a guess?
Yeah.
What would it be? It's very close. Repeat after me. Opposite.
Opposite.
Okay, so inverse means opposite. If I say I have negative 7, what's the opposite of negative 7?
Positive.
Positive 7. If I say I have positive 10, what's the opposite of positive 10?
Negative 10.
Negative 10. So I want you to look right here. This is an account that has 4 different transactions in it. How many of you would say you have a bank account? Okay, so there's a few of you that already have a bank account. Hopefully there is positive dollars in there, not negative dollars where you owe the bank some money. But here you can see 4 transactions that happened in July. There's 2 key words I want you to understand here. Withdrawal. What does a withdrawal mean?
Like you take money.
You took money out. Okay, so you can see the first withdrawal. How much is it? Negative $40. You're taking it out, so that's a negative. Okay, that's not going to be inside your bank account anymore if you withdraw it. What about a deposit? What does that mean? You say, I won some money, or it was my birthday. I'm going to put some money in here, so you're depositing it in. Is that positive or negative if you deposit it? Very good. So using our little rule that we just talked about, additive inverse. Remind me again, what does inverse mean? Opposite. Do you guys see any numbers up here that are opposite of each other? Which ones? 50 and negative 50. Guess what you can do if you have positive 50 and negative 50? You make them 0. They cancel each other out. So before I even have to add 4 crazy numbers together, I can see, oh, I can get rid of 50 and negative 50 because those are opposite numbers and they always equal 0. Now all I'm left with is negative 40 and 75. If I wanted to put it here, I could see negative 40 plus positive 75. Or you could write it either way, $75 minus $40. In either case, you will get the same exact answer. Can you guys tell me what is the final balance? $35 is correct. Now, always remember when we're dealing with money, please make sure you put that dollar sign there so I know that your final answer is also in money. Okay, I saw quite a few people who got pretty close to this. Some of you, your partner was able to help you to understand what you might have been missing. First things first, always look for a common denominator. What should my common denominator be?
10.
It should be a 10. So we're just going to multiply both of these by 2. Then I drop down negative 7/10, drop down my plus sign, and what is 1/5 now?
2/10.
It's equivalent to 2/10. Notice I have different signs. So I've got to subtract and take. Remember, keep the 10, okay? Always keep the same denominator when adding and subtracting. And then 7/10 minus 2/10 is 5/10. Take the sign of the larger number, which was a negative, because negative 7/10 is bigger than positive 2/10, okay? Can 5/10 be simplified?
Yes.
To what?
1/2.
1/2. So your answer should have been negative 1/2. A lot of you got 1/2. Don't forget that negative, okay? So if you did not get that correct, please erase your work and go ahead and fix this. 2 thumbs up if you did get that correct. All right, a little more than half. Good job. There's something a little tricky here. I have plus a minus. What always wins, the positive or the negative? The negative. So if I rewrite this, that just means negative 3/4 minus 1/3. So I was able to eliminate that sign, okay? Because the negative always wins. If I'm adding a negative, that means I'm subtracting it. Now, do I have a common denominator? No. What should be my common denominator? A 12. In order to get the 4 to a 12, I multiply by 3. In order to get the 3 to a 12, I multiply by 4. So now we'll work underneath it. Negative 3/4 becomes what? Negative 9/12. So remember to keep that negative with it. Now I'm going to drop down my negative sign. See, it's right there, so I just continue, bring it down the same exact spot. 1/3 becomes what? Okay, 4/12. Do I have the same sign or a different sign? Same sign. Add the numbers, keep the sign. What do you get? 13 over 12. Is that positive or negative? That is negative, okay? Now, once again, I'm okay if you keep it improper only because right up here in my original problem, it was not a mixed number. However, if you instead said, what would this be if it was a mixed number? Negative 1 and 1/12. I'm okay with either of those answers. I will accept either one. Okay? Okay, this one I did have a lot more people who got it correct. How many of you would rather deal with decimals rather than fractions? Okay, and that's totally fine, all right? So, same sign or different sign? Different sign. So what do I have to do? Subtract and take. Always put the bigger number on top. So I've got 4.3. I'm going to subtract them. What do I get when I subtract it?
1.7.
1.7. Is that positive or negative?
Positive.
That is positive. So you should have had 1.7. All right. Excellent job listening today, guys. You did very well.